Hi, I'm Brandon. Welcome to my channel, Books in the Shire. It's officially October, which means it's time for a monthly wrap-up. So let's talk about all the books that I finished and read in September. The first book I read in September was A Torch Against the Night by Sabaa Tahir. This is the second book in An Ember in the Ashes series. I gave this book a 3.5 stars. I enjoyed it. I really enjoy the world, but I felt like the plot was just a bit slow. I tend to enjoy faster-paced books. I think it's like an attention span thing. We all know how electronics have affected all of that, but sometimes it's hard for me to stay engaged with a book when it's slower. And then this one wasn't entirely slow. It's just, there were moments where I was like really invested, and then some moments where I'm like, okay, like, let's keep going. But overall, I did enjoy it. I thought this book did a good job of building upon the first book and really kind of expanding the world, expanding the characters, and kind of expanding the drama, everything that's going to happen, the plot, I guess. In the first book, it was just Elias and Lia's perspective, but in this one, we also get Helene's perspective, which I really enjoyed because I think Helene is such an interesting character. She's a rule follower, but at the same time, she's so caring and loving of her friends and family that it's hard for her sometimes to push the rules aside. I think she always still follows them, but I kind of like that this book starts testing her and makes her question like the rules that she's been following and whether she should continue to follow them or not. I really enjoyed Elias's story in this one. In the first book, I definitely preferred his POV than over Lia's, even though I thought Lia's was interesting and it was very kind of brutal. I did enjoy Elias's because I liked his inner turmoil, and I think this one does a good job of kind of building on that, where now he's, escaped, but he also is having these conflicted feelings with Lia and conflicted feelings about his duty and what's right, and I really enjoyed that. His story grew really nicely, and I'm really enjoying seeing it progress in the other books so far. I did read the third book in this series, which I'll talk about a bit later, but I'm really just loving his character progression and his story arc. I find it so fascinating. And going back to Helene too, like her story arc, I'm really enjoying. It's so fascinating. I honestly, all of them, the three main characters, I'm really enjoying how their stories are building, how they're progressing, how they're evolving as characters. Particularly Lia, she was so innocent in the first book, and I feel like she's just getting more and more badass, which I really love. Next, I read You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight by Kaylin Bayron. I gave this book, I believe, 3 stars. This is like my first ever horror book, I believe. I've read mysteries, but I've never read horror, so this was a lot of fun kind of diving into this new genre. I'm glad I chose a YA horror so I could kind of dip my toes in and not go extreme. This book was a lot of fun, and because it's so different than what I typically read from, it was intriguing and it kept my attention. The first half of the book is a lot of build-up, and at first I didn't entirely love it, but I think it paid off a lot in the end because a lot of it was like building up characters so you feel connected to them as shit goes down, basically. So I really appreciated that. In the moment, I didn't appreciate it as much, but by the end, I was like so glad that there was all of that character focus. One thing I didn't entirely enjoy is like one of the more big reveals, I guess, of kind of like killers. It was just kind of weird, and I think it was a little too weird for me. Not that it was bad or anything or that it was poorly done. I was just kind of like, I'm not really enjoying it for the story. But I think that, Kaylin Bayron made it or wrote it very nicely. She wrote it well. It just like wasn't vibing with me, I guess. And I do want to mention one spoiler, so skip ahead if you don't want to hear it. Or I guess I'm going to mention 2 spoilers, sorry. But I really loved like the final reveal with the grandson, because I can't remember the character's name, but basically he's like this really lovable, sweet character throughout the book, and you're just like, oh my god, I hope nothing bad happens to him. And then you find out that he's the grandson of the killers, and that just like broke my heart. I was like, no, he was so sweet. Like, why would you do that to me? But I thought it was just so well done. And then the other spoiler I want to mention is that I really loved that this whole book, except for the final chapter, is written from Charity's perspective, but she dies in the end. I think that that was so smart because, I think most people, myself included, would assume that, oh, Charity's gonna live because, she is the main character. She's this whole book is from her perspective. So I really liked that she ended up dying in the end. I think it just showed that you can kind of change the story a bit but still make it worthwhile. Like, you know, obviously in some things, like in Halloween, for instance, it wouldn't be satisfying if Jamie Lee Curtis's character died because, you know, she's a badass fighting off the character. And I do think Charity's just as much of a badass, if not more. But I think that it just fits so well for the story that I loved that she died in the end. You know, I would recommend this to people who are just starting out in horror, because obviously I've never read horror books either, so like this was a good introduction for me to the genre, so I think it would be good for others as well. Next we have Hunting Prince Dracula by Carrie Maniscalco. This is the second book in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. This is my favorite in that series so far, and it was my favorite read of the month. I adored this book. I gave it 4 stars. I loved the atmosphere. I loved the setting. The mystery was pretty good. There were a few things with the mystery I didn't love, but the final reveal and stuff I did enjoy. I like that these books aren't trying to do anything revolutionary or unique. They're just having a good time, and that's what I really enjoy about them. I feel like Carrie Maniscalco isn't trying to make it like the biggest, grandest reveal of all time, something the readers never would have guessed. And, you know, the characters are very standard characters. There's nothing super quirky or crazy about them, you know. I do really enjoy that about this series, so I think that's why I liked this one so much. Was it was just a good time. The setting was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed like the Dracula elements of it. One thing I really enjoyed about this one was learning more about Thomas and his family. In the first book you get a lot about Audrey Rose, given that the whole series, so far at least, has been from her perspective. It was nice to kind of get to know more about Thomas that wasn't entirely from Audrey Rose's perspective. Particularly, I really enjoyed getting to know his sister, and I hope to see her in future books because I thought she was really interesting. But yeah, getting to know his backstory, I do think it was a little cheeky. This is a bit of a spoiler, but I do think it was a little cheeky that like he's a descendant of Dracula. But I was like, at the same time, I really don't care. Like I said, I think these books are just a lot of fun. They're not meant to be taken overly serious, so I enjoyed all of those elements even despite that little reveal, I guess. Next up we have Belladonna by Adeline Grace. I gave this book 3 stars and I thought it was good, but it wasn't my favorite. The thing I really loved about this one was Death, which I think most people did enjoy that about this book. He was just, you know, sexy, we all know, okay? But I also enjoyed that he made Cigna question things and that he tried to tell her that it's like life is so important, you should value it, and death is even though it's the end to some people, it's not truly the end. So I just really enjoyed, I guess, the like things he was making her think about and question. This one had a good atmosphere as well. I thought it was like kind of cozy. I enjoyed the setting. I thought that really helped with the vibes of the book. I hate that word for this, but that's the only word I can think of. Something I didn't love was the mystery of the story. I felt like the mystery, while there was points to it, I think as a whole it was just kind of boring and wasn't necessary. I think a mystery would have suited the story well, but I think maybe a different mystery would have. I don't know if that totally makes sense, but I just felt like a lot of the moments in the mystery, it kind of felt handed to Cigna, not necessarily like her putting in the work, which that could have been done with any mystery, but I think this mystery was just pretty simple and straightforward that it felt like, okay, she's getting handed these answers, like she couldn't work a little bit for it. Particularly the reveal at the end of the mystery, to me it didn't fit at all. You didn't see any of it throughout the story for that reveal to be satisfactory. It felt like it was just there to create like a oh my gosh moment, not like truly made sense or fit the story. I kind of wish it had been someone else. The one I would have preferred, I think, would have been the obvious choice, but sometimes the obvious choice is the right choice, and that's not a bad thing. Next, I read A Reaper at the Gates by Sabaa Tahir. I'm not going to talk too much about this one because I spoke about it in the vlog I just posted, but I gave this book 4 stars. I thought this one did a really good job of building on the previous 2 books and really expanding on, I guess, the world and the plot. You know, you're finally getting into the war in this one. Things are getting intense and dark, and I'm really enjoying that. I think something I didn't appreciate as much about the first 2 books until I read this one was just how dark the world is. Like, how bad things are and how extreme things can become. And I think this one really expanded on that and made it so much more like, holy shit, bad stuff is gonna happen. You know, I feel like characters might die, I don't know, and I'm gonna be sad if they are, but it just grew a lot more, I think. I briefly discussed the evolution of characters in A Torch Against the Night, and I think this one continued to make the characters evolve and grow. Like, I think Laya became such a badass in this one. She was already starting to in the second book, but this one just like truly pushed her beyond like what I thought she could be, I guess. She just became so awesome. Like, she was more firm in who she was. Like, she knew who she was more grounded, and she was willing to fight for what she believes in, and I absolutely loved that. I really loved that Elias's character, he had a lot of issues in this one, and sometimes I'm like, boy, you're so stupid, just do it, like, just do the thing, but he wouldn't, and it was so frustrating, but in the best way possible, because I think you're seeing him struggle to decide and figure out what he's supposed to do, how he can help people, and that was really well done. And then Helene's character, again, she's just more badass, but I like that in this one you get a bit more of her softer side. She's still really extreme, and I love that about her, but in this one you see more of the softer side of her. The last book that I read in September was Escaping from Houdini by Carrie Maniscalco. This is the third book in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. I'm just kind of flying through this series and An Ember in the Ashes, and I'm loving it because both are really enjoyable. But this one I gave 4 stars, I think. Yeah, I don't know if I said that, but I gave this book 4 stars. I enjoyed Mephistopheles as a character. I like that he kind of made Audrey Rose question things. I like that he made her not only question things around her, but question herself, like, what do I want? What are my intentions? I think that was important because something that, you know, I don't entirely love, but I'm okay with in the series is that it was insta-lovey. But I like that in this one she starts not to question her relationship with Thomas, but like to think about what she wants as a person, because it's totally okay to want to be in a relationship, but is that truly what she wants in this moment in time? One thing I wish that this book had done a bit more of was use the setting in a bit more of an extreme way. So this whole book takes place on a boat, so they're isolated. It's a murder mystery, and yet I feel like there's not enough chaos or hecticness to make it feel like they're stuck on a boat. It kind of seems like people are like willy-nilly doing whatever. Each night, basically, they go and watch the Moonlight Carnival. Is that what it's called? Yeah, Moonlight Carnival do their little shows. And I know that they say fewer and fewer people come each night. But I don't know. Personally, if I was on a boat where people were being murdered, I would probably stay in my room unless I needed to go get food. Like, I would be so scared to go die, especially when it usually happens at the performances. Like, why would people keep going? Also, I didn't love this mystery as much as I loved the others. It wasn't my favorite just in terms of reveal, progression, anything like that, but it wasn't bad by any means either. I think it was just a bit more... I think it was trying to be a bit more confusing than it needed to be, but it was still enjoyable. And I kind of wish that they had gone down the route of exploring more of their leads a bit more and like questioning, like, oh, maybe that's the person. Oh, maybe that's the murderer. I felt like they started to do that, but didn't fully didn't fully go in those directions, because you're learning, this character is very focused on Audrey Rose as a person and figuring out what she wants, which like I said, I enjoyed, but sometimes I felt like that might have gotten in the way of the mystery. Those are all the books in September. I had a really good reading month. I only had 3 and 4 stars, which is pretty good. Sadly, I didn't have any 5 stars, but maybe next month, I'm hoping. But thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in another one.